No, it isn't. Okay, you ready? Okay. All right. Why don't you guys sit down, you know? Where's John? Running his mouth as usual.
John. The board, sit this way, what's your board?
Okay, there's two members there. Now they're gonna sit down. Okay? So what happened? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our public meeting on the post office redevelopment plan. Thank you all for coming out on this cold night, and for those of you who are joining us on TV, thank you for taking the time out to be with us. A couple of ground rules. We have a number of people that are going to be presenting, so just to remind the presenters, you have to pass the microphone. So try not to say anything or answer a question unless you have the microphone, because we want everybody here to hear you, but also everyone at home. Then we're going to try to get through the presentation probably in about 20-25 minutes so that we could get to your questions. We're going to try to end the meeting at 9 p.m. The only thing we ask is if you have a question, you tell us who you are, and then you can have a question. We're looking for crisp questions and comments. The people on the watching us at home, we have numbers. Are you picking up this call number? As long as I'm not standing in front of it. Okay. There's a number here. I'll read it off. If you have, we're doing live call-ins, so you can call it in. The number is 973-762-8120. That's the main call number. They'll ask you for the extension, and the extension is 2110. So again, it's 973-762-8120, and the extension is 2110. And someone will answer the phone, get your question, they'll write it down, and someone will run it in here. We need your name when you ask the question on the phone, and we will also announce your name and the question. So we're trying to make this available for everyone's input, make these technologies available. Before I turn it over to the folks from the development team, let me just put this a little bit in perspective as to why we're here tonight and how we got here. This story really started about 15 years ago when the Economic Development Commission at the time, and the mayor was Ellen Davenport, when they approached the post office about moving its sorting operation. At that time, the economic development leaders made a decision that having the sorting operation, essentially a mail factory, where you would sort the mail in the back and the trucks would come in and deliver it, and you'd have the little Jeeps taking it out, was really not suitable any longer for downtown area. And if you remember, about 15 years ago is when Midtown Direct also started. So being an area with an active transit hub, folks were thinking differently about what you might want in the downtown. And having a mail factory there was not something that was desirable any longer. So the Economic Development Commission at the time was chaired by resident Frank Nolan. He wrote a letter to the post office asking them to think about relocating, recognizing that they did have a lease that went through 2013. The post office was polite, but essentially over the years has told us the same thing, is that they have a lease until 2013, and the lease was very favorable to them, and they really weren't going to move. So we tried all kinds of things to give them incentives to move, and essentially they ran out the clock, and in fact have run past the clock, because they are still there, and there's no need for us, we're not looking to throw them out. We do, the town now, as the provisions of the lease dictate, the town owns the property, has always owned the property, but the town now owns the building, because at the end of the lease, the building reverted to the town. So we are on a month-to-month lease with the post office. Currently, the post office has a lease until March 9th of 2014. They are looking for another facility. They've identified a place on Springfield Avenue, but they have not produced a lease to us yet, so we don't know if they're actually going to be successful there. But we are sending them a signal that we have to, we're moving forward with this, so they have to get going on this. So the post office is there, and we'll stay there for a few more months, and as we move forward with this project. Now, tonight is sort of getting towards the end of public meetings, of a number of public meetings that we've had. And it really started about 2 years ago in January of 2012, when we had close to 100 people come over at the Bergdorf Center to really start engaging in a conversation about what we might want to see at the post office. And we had a meeting then in 2012 in January and February with our planner from Phillips Price Greigel. And we took all that information and we kind of worked it, sat on it, and kind of just really weighed in our mind what made sense. We then engaged a team of students, graduate students from Columbia University, to help think through what we might want to do with that. And we thought it was useful to take a little step back. It took us about 4 or 5 months to deal with the students, but we thought it was useful because we wanted to make sure that we were exploring everything. We were not confining ourselves to the way we were thinking. So they brought in some kind of out-of-the-box ideas, and they provided us a report in early February of last year. At the same time, we were finishing up our plan, and essentially the way the law is set forth is that as you develop these properties, you have to develop a plan. So we developed this plan in February of 2013, and then we spent roughly 5 months having meetings about it, going back and forth, meeting with the planning board, and the planning board was holding hearings about it. And eventually in July of 2013, we passed the plan. And that gave us the ability to go out and try to find developers. And this is all prescribed by the State Redevelopment Act, so this is what we were following. So our first go-around was what's called a request for qualifications, and we sent that out in July of 2013. And essentially we asked developers to tell us why they feel that they're qualified to take this project on. So we got 8 responses from developers, and we reviewed those responses, and of those 8, we picked 3 that we thought were qualified, that had responded to the request for qualifications. Essentially, we picked the 3 that we thought were possible partners in this. And what we did then is in November of 2013, we sent out a request for proposals. Now the difference in the qualifications and the proposals is the qualifications is really telling us about themselves. Why are you qualified? Once we got to the proposal stage, we wanted to hear what their thinking was about how to make this work. So from the 3, we picked 1. Actually, we took it from 3 to 2, and then we picked 1. And the 1 is L&M Partners, and you'll meet all of the partners and all of the team here. We thought that they were the best to go forth with. And so what we then did is on January 1st of this year, about 6 weeks ago, we passed a resolution saying that we were designating them as, or giving them a status as a developer, and we had 90 days to negotiate an agreement with them. So we're about 30 days into that 90 days, and we're still going to be working on developing that. But what most importantly is after January 7th, it gave us the ability to announce publicly who the group was that we wanted to work with, and to begin having meetings with various segments of the community. So in just the last 10 days or so, the development team has met with the Maplewood Village Alliance. Yesterday they met with merchants from Maplewood Village. Tonight they met with representatives of the Chamber of Commerce. And now they're meeting with you all, and both here in the hall and those of you on TV. The one thing I want to stress is that this is not a final product. Anything you see here is still going to go through a lot more discussion with stakeholders. Every time we have a meeting, we get better ideas than what we have already. And there's going to be some pushing and pulling of various aspects. You know, how are we going to get the parking achieved? What's the look of the building going to be? How are we going to make the construction done in a way that doesn't impact the existing businesses during the time of construction? So we are prepared to have those conversations, to go forward. No idea is a bad idea. We're taking the ideas and trying to sort through them to weigh what works and what's possible. So this is still a process. From here, in about a month, they're going to come back with some revisions to this. They're going to be meeting with the Maplewood Village Alliance Design Committee. And then somewhere in the next couple of months, they'll be before the planning board with a site plan. And that's when we really are starting to talk turkey as to what's going to go where and how things are going to happen. So once that happens and once the site plan is approved, then we will move forward, and then you'll see some actual work being done on the site. So we're here to answer questions. Again, we'll let these guys talk to us for a while. I do want to recognize my colleagues from the Township Committee, Deputy Mayor Kathy Leventhal, excuse me, Committeeman Marlon Brownlee, and Committeewoman India Larrier. And at this point, again, if you want to call in, 762-8120, and it's extension 2110. And I'm going to introduce John Cortell from L&M Development Partners.
Thank you very much. Listen, I want to start by apologizing to those people who've heard this rant before. Some of you, I see, have come to other meetings we've held, and so you will hear some of the same stuff you've heard before. I apologize if this is therefore at all redundant. I stand before you pretty psyched that I'm in this position. I'm a Maplewood resident. I work for a development company which has at its disposal contacts and resources who can collaborate with us in assuring that what we do here on this site is preserve and extend the greatness of Maplewood. I live here and I like it here enormously, and I would very much like to see elements of it accentuated, elements of it preserved, and I believe that in combination with the team standing against that wall, we can make for this site what you hope for and what you want for, because I too have great expectations for this site. L&M Development Partners, the firm for which I work, is a New York State-based firm. Although we have made inroads into New Jersey, California, and Louisiana, we have 10,000 units developed. We operate and manage 6,000 currently. We are an owner, builder, manager, and equity fund manager. And we bring an arsenal, if you will, of about 200 people that brings to the table resources and expertise that will be helpful in providing for creative ideas that will solve the problems, address the issues that this community raises. So far, not only am I enormously impressed with my team for working within a narrow space, but I'm thrilled by the opportunity to engage with my neighbors and fellow Maplewood residents whose passion and acumen is already very clear. It's clear that this is a town full of, I would joke that it's mostly architects and planners, but it's obviously people who feel very strongly about this town. And as we stand before you, we share with you only that which we start with. This was a vision that we had put together in something of a a process. I don't want you to think, for example, that we slapped this together, but this represents an initial effort that will profit from input and it will evolve as a result of input. To date, having met with various constituencies, the mayor mentioned a couple of those meetings, we have gained and the plan has already begun to improve. That said, what we stand before you with is that which the Township Committee saw as part of our RFP response. So let me make sure to herald the guys who are standing over there. So the first guy on the left is Bill Balter. He is a development, a substantial developer on his own merit. It's a thrill to have him engaged with us on this. He is a developer of enormous regard, particularly in communities like Maplewood. He's doing work in Larchmont right now, in Westchester. He does understand the issues that are pertinent to towns like Maplewood. So I thought it was important that he be a critical part of this team, and I'm glad he's working with us. Rich and Frank, who are standing next to Bill, are representatives of Beyer Blinder Bell. They are a world-class architecture firm based in New York City whose projects include Grand Central Terminal, Empire State Building, and we are collaborating now with them and Jack and Alex, who stand next to them, on the restoration of the Hanes flagship department store in downtown Newark. That collaboration has been enormously fruitful, and I'm thrilled that we can do what we're doing with the Hanes development, where we're bringing a Whole Foods to downtown Newark. We are going to be able to do some of the same stuff with the same sensitivity to an important site here in Maplewood. I'm going to do a bit of an overview of the plans, and then I'm going to ask Bill to step in and supplement some of what I say. If my wife were here today, she would herald the fact that this plan and the community's concerns will probably start and end with parking. And it is clear that in the conversations we've had, people care about parking. We're going to try and address that centrally to this plan. I'm going to, however, defer some of that conversation and let Bill go into a bit more detail on the parking itself, but we know parking matters. The important ask I made of the design team early was to try and extend the drive aisle from behind Village Coffee so that it continued along the access easement to the prominent train entry point by Valley National Bank. This circulation pattern I thought was immensely important, and as current, the post office squashes that because the post office is an impediment to fluid traffic back and forth that way. This was also important to me because I felt this access tunnel on the south side of the train platform is sort of a bummer. And by removing the impediment, the building encroaches, the post office building encroaches too close to it, so it becomes invisible at that corner. There's sort of a dark corner. It'd be nice to open it up, make it more visible. We want to encourage a circulation around the building, so instead of being stuck on one side of the post office or the other, this site would be built to enable circulation around it. In effect, driving pedestrians up to Maplewood Avenue and up to Maplewood Avenue this way. We want to connect through and by our site, not be an impediment to fluid traffic, retail consumption, and the like. The important bit, and one of the elements I think is important from the architectural point of view, is that these guys met with me at Abel Baker, walked the town with me, and saw that there was an enormous amount here already that mattered, and that was pretty cool. Buildings indicated here on the bottom of this image, and it's probably impossible for most of you to see this, but the Wells Fargo Bank building, for example, at the corner of Baker and Maplewood, has a cool effect, a beveled or a chamfered effect. And these guys grabbed onto that element. It repeats itself at Edith's Cafe near Village Tratt. And the hope and the plan is to steal a little bit from that, emulating it by including it as a feature in our building. That kind of sensitivity is typical of the work of Beyer Blinder Bell. Rich and Frank did show you photos at the other end in order to highlight how much of the existing assets in the town they wanted to celebrate, recognize, and extend rather than bring an alien pod in and try to land it on the post office building. Further to the description of the site, we're showing you a floor plan. It's 2 floor plans, and then, thank you, and then what somebody earlier explained as a cake cut, like a wedding cake cut through the center of the building so that you can see how the uses are stacked on one another. The image on the top left describes our proposed location of King's. It's a part of the redevelopment plan that drew us here was that elements like 25 units, setbacks, 45 feet of maximum height, those elements were already in the plan. The town worked very hard to develop, so we were challenged to work within a set of rules, and that was both an invitation and a challenge we welcomed. So the wedding cake depiction on the bottom highlights that we are doing a 45-foot tall building from the average grade around the building, and that is per the plan requirement. At 45 feet, and what we're showing is 4 stories above the King's. So the King's is at grade, retail is at street, and then 3 levels of residential rental above it. At 45 feet, we are complying with the redevelopment plan, and I believe we are not imposing too great a mass on the streetscape. It cannot be too big because folks who divined the redevelopment plan thought of this before, and we will go through a period of exercises to highlight how this building will relate to buildings across the street, like the movie theater, and other buildings, so that everybody understands how it will not be an imposing, overwhelming structure. So King's is located on the grade. We've been told, we adhered to guidelines that it needed to be approximately 10,000 square feet of selling space plus some up to 5,000 square feet of back of house space. In the current depiction, we're showing about 10,000 square feet of selling and then something less than 5,000 square feet of back of house. In our current depiction, the back of house extends to the first floor and is at or near Rickleton Square. We hope we can extend street-level retail along Maplewood Avenue with storefronts accessible from Maplewood Avenue directly, so that's on the first floor. And then, so yes, thank you, Bill. So these awnings highlight retail. The residential starts there on the second floor, third and fourth. The terraces are built to accommodate, meet the requirements of the setbacks. So the building is defined in such a manner that it will have the character defined by the parameters of the redevelopment plan. The big news here remains that we are not building the footprint of the building as large as it is currently, and in so doing, we're going to improve how the village center works, how easy it is to get around and in it, and Bill's about to tell you that we're actually going to increase the number of parking spaces that are there currently. Right now, you know that multiple of those parking spaces are occupied by mail trucks. In the process of creating this artery in the back, we're going to make accessible to the retail shopper, to the area resident, more parking spaces. So without further ado, can I ask Bill to accentuate the parking component of our proposal and then address a couple of the other issues that have become pertinent or we know to be important because people have emphasized them, construction and demo related issues. How do you want to do it? Do you want us to finish and then take Q&A?
Hi. Hi, I'm Bill Balter. Thanks, Jonathan. As Jonathan said, we've heard a lot about parking, so before we get to questions, let me sort of explain where we're starting and what we're going to create. What I'm going to talk about is sort of a combination of what you're looking at in the plan and what we know is going to evolve from the input we've already had. There's currently on the property about 33 parking spaces right now. There's a post office that's roughly 15,000 feet. In our plan, we're going to obviously eliminate the 15,000 feet of post office. We're going to put back roughly 20,000 feet of Kings and retail above that. We're going to go from roughly the 33 spaces that exist to 60 spaces that we'll be creating. And
right, if this is existing parking.
okay, so this is the existing building we're talking about, and obviously the post office goes all the way back to the property line here. Just to orient yourselves, this is Maplewood Avenue, this is Village Coffee. Right now, this parking lot and these 4 spaces totals 33 parking spaces. What we're going to do in our plan is take this line and pull it back up here. This building will go away, but when we're done, there'll be parking all along this area. That's what this shows here. We're talking about now the parking behind here. So we're going to have roughly 20,000 feet of retail, about 60 spaces, which is an increase of about 27 spaces from where we are now. On top of the commercial space, on top of the retail space, we'll have up to 25 apartments. The 25 apartments, because of the parking constraints in the village, the 25 apartments in their leases, they will not be able to park on site during the day. They will be able to park there at night, which is similar to other situations for people who live in the village right now, where they can park at night on village permit parking, but they can't park there during the day. So what we're trying to do by that is to not further burden the retail parking availability in the village. In addition, in our commercial leases, all of the employees for King's and for the street level retail will be required to use merchant parking passes and not be allowed to park in this site. So the point here is that we get that it's important to not take valuable spaces from the downtown, and again, also to create more spaces, so we're creating additional spaces. As I started by saying, this plan is evolving. In the current plan you're looking at, which is what the township approved of us as a redeveloper on, we did not have double-loaded parking across from Village Coffee. In the 4 or 5 meetings we've had since then, we've really learned how important it is to maximize parking. I think while you're not looking at it now, in the coming weeks, you'll see further versions of the plan that allow us to get up to about 60 parking spaces. Currently, we don't have that many, but we know that we can get at least 60 parking spaces in the plan. So that's all I'm going to say about parking. We'll take questions about that, I'm sure, but I want to move on to another big concern that we've heard. We're taking in the middle of Maplewood, we're taking down a post office. How's that going to impact everyone who lives and works here? How's it going to impact the merchants and their customers? Fortunately, as a lot of you know, and I'll put it back up, this existing post office has a niche taken out of it, basically right here, and this is like an awning, a roof. We're able to, what we'll do with the post office is it'll be a period of, an intense period of probably a couple of weeks, and then in all, probably a 1-month process of taking the building down. And what we'll do is essentially fence in the whole area, and then from the inside we'll take it down. We don't anticipate it having almost any impact on any of the constituencies, the people who live here, the merchants, their customers. The only time that there will be some conflict will just be when we're actually having trucks leave the site with material. That's probably less than a 2-week process, and that'll get managed so that we're not interfering with the peak traffic on the surrounding roads. So I think with proper management, that will not really be too difficult for everyone that uses the downtown. I also know that the township is forming a committee, or may have formed a committee already, to work with us to develop this plan to make sure that what we do, both from a demo and construction plan, and I'll get into construction in a minute, but from the perspective of the town, they're comfortable that what we're doing limits to the greatest extent possible the impacts that we have. On the construction, one of the advantages to the circulation that we're creating behind the building is that it also is a perfect area to stage the construction. So most of what we're going to do will be, let me back up. Right now, there's no access to the back of the building. There's a post office there. There won't be access to the back of this building until we're done with our building. But during construction, we'll be using this area to build our building. So one of the things that worked very well about this plan is it allows us, again, we'll have a fence around the site, and it allows us to build a building from a part of the site that you don't currently have access to now without interfering with Maplewood Avenue. The construction period here is the intense construction after we do the demo. The intense construction is probably about a 10-month period, and I envision this project going on probably for 14 months. I'd say a maximum of 16 months. But again, the intense construction will probably be 10 months. Yesterday, in one of the meetings that we had with stakeholders, we learned that if possible, it would be best if we do the construction at certain times of the year. You know, it's been suggested that we try to do the demo in the month of August because it's the least busy time in the downtown. It's been suggested that perhaps we try to start construction in January so that by the time we get to the next Christmas season, we're not interfering with the downtown. I think all of that stuff is manageable and things, it's just a good example of why these meetings are important. Because, you know, we've done this. You know, I've built 3,000 units of housing and a lot of commercial, but this is your town. I've never built here before. So we really do welcome all of your input so that we can make it better. Anything else I didn't touch on? I think we're ready to take questions.
Is there anyone who would like to ask a question? Anyone want to ask a question? Yes. Just say your name. And
my name is Ruth Ross, and I want to point something out.
yeah, let her have the mic. Go ahead, Ruth.
I live in this building here. I'm one of the few apartment dwellers in Maplewood, and both parking and apartments are part of my concern. I guess it's hard for me to talk about parking without making my little snipe. I have a Beetle. So I have a Beetle. Yeah, no. I'm actually looking for a turtle, not a beetle. Yeah, anyhow, my thoughts and feelings about those of us who have SUVs in this town, a town with many narrow, small streets, is not, I'll make no comments because it wouldn't be appropriate.
And you have a question?
Public setting. Yes.
Yes.
And I did want to know if there are any plans for any other, I wanted to ask when the lease for the post office is up, the actual lease, because I had read that the lease, I couldn't remember when it was.
The lease right now is extended to March 9th, 2014. And after that, it'll be on a month-to-month basis.
Oh, okay, because I had read that they had wanted to ask for an extension, and I didn't know whether that was. So March is, you know, a month.
Right around the corner.
Right around the corner. Are there plans to do any other reconstruction, deconstruction with any of the other buildings in the area?
No.
It's just...
No, just the post office site.
Okay. All right, that's...
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Julie. Let's take the microphone so we don't have to repeat it. Thanks.
Is King's on board? Are they really going to move across the street? I have more questions.
Why don't you ask a question?
Okay. I go to the King's in Short Hills in, whatever that is, I guess that's Short Hills. And, you know, in the back of their building there, they have huge bays that must accommodate about a dozen trucks. Are there going to be bays for their delivery trucks behind the building?
King's has been in Maplewood for a long time, but their current store is an inadequate store in their own minds. I think before we ever got involved in the redevelopment planning with the town, they had conversations with King's and understood that King's wanted to move here. King's understands that this is going to be a four-sided building and that they're in a downtown and there's certain constraints. We're able to make this dramatically better than what they have now, but it's not going to have everything on their wish list. Jonathan and I have met them in Hoboken at their store there, and that's a new store, but it's like this in a downtown, and it's a four-sided building. And we know what they need in terms of a new building, and we understand the constraints. We think we understand the constraints that they can live with. We have had a couple of meetings with King's, several conversations with King's, and as I said, this plan that you're looking at is sort of an old plan at this point, and it's evolving. Whether King's ends up here or not, we don't know for sure, but we think they'll end up here. We're really heading toward that. Specifically on the loading docks, what we're trying to work out with Kings, because of the value of parking on the site, is a situation where they have a limited window in which they can have deliveries, so that those deliveries will take up some of the parking spaces in that period, let's say from 6 a.m. to noon. But other than that, the parking will be available. There will not be an unlimited number of trucks. I think there'll be 2 trucks. We're envisioning 2 trucks is the maximum trucks that they'll be able to have on site. But they're those huge trucks that back up on Maplewood Avenue. I mean, Jonathan has a great picture of what it looks like when one of those trucks is backing in. It'll be dramatically better in our site than it is on Maplewood. And on Maplewood Avenue, they'll be gone. You won't have that at all. So I think Kings gets it. What they're getting out of this store as compared to that store is they're getting a much better loading situation than they have. They're getting parking, and they're getting a bigger store. They're seeking 10,000 feet. I'm not sure that we'll get it that big, but their store right now is, I think it's under 7,000 feet. I think it's in the 6,000s right now. So it'll be a much nicer store.
The other thing is that the redevelopment plan says that no loading provisions can back up onto Maplewood Avenue. So anything that goes there will not be done in such a way that they have to park on Maplewood Avenue. It'll have to be parked off-site. Now, if Kings does not move across the street, then we'll have to continue to live with that White Rose truck trying to get in between those 2 buildings. We have a couple of questions from the phone. One is directly to you guys. For the 25 apartments, have you considered making them condos instead of rentals?
To the person on the phone and to those who are here, we have absolutely considered options. Obviously, it's still early yet in a process, and while I do live here, I don't know all that the market may hold for the redevelopment of this site. My assumption is that it will be easier to digest for a potential renter the living above a supermarket. It is hard for me to imagine that a for-sale product in this kind of a predicament with loading and a train running by behind. I suspect that the best application is a rental one and not a condo. We have done both Bill's firm and our firm have done both applications. So I'm not sure we're coming necessarily with a concerted bias, but I think we have to be practical, and our current thinking is that the rental play is the right one.
Okay. The other question is probably above your pay grade, but it says, why not open up, in conjunction with New Jersey Transit, a train platform at Rickleton Square for people coming on trains from New York, so they'd be able to get off on the Rickleton Square side, as opposed to the middle side. Essentially, when you come from New York, you're getting off on the middle track, and then you have to go down the stairs. If there was a way to have a train platform directly coming off onto Rickleton Square, it would be, one suggestion here is it would meet the needs of handicapped users. So this is way beyond you, but I do want to ask you, will you be talking to New Jersey Transit about this project, and are these the kinds of things that you might think of exploring?
Good luck.
No, I think that's actually a really cool suggestion. We fully intend to work with New Jersey Transit as soon as possible. We are currently working, L&M is currently developing a property in Orange, and that property is immediately adjacent to the train tracks. So we have existing relationships at New Jersey Transit. We have already reached out to try to arrange for in-person meetings on site to sort of walk around with them. They did ask us to wait until after the big game, and we are going to honor that request. And in the process of meeting with them, I think we will raise that kind of question, and to the extent there are other questions of that ilk that we're not thinking about, maybe we can continue to talk about that kind of question.
I think also there are other issues like the tunnels that they control, that I think there's dialogue that we want to have with them about that as well.
Dave. Let's go back to the King's question. Okay, that's all right. The question is going to the King's question. Would you say how the back of house space will be enlarged?
Yeah, as I understand it, this sketch does not have 5,000 square feet.
Right, the sketch that you have, it does not have 5,000 square feet.
I would say if I answer you specifically, it would probably be a little disingenuous because until we're now really in conversations with Kings, in 3 weeks or a month, we'll come back with a plan that hopefully works for them, that will balance the constraints of the site with the needs of Kings. I think it's likely that we'll expand, but exactly how we expand it, I'm not sure until we really include Kings in the conversation. No, it'll stay.
Well, Bill, because people can't hear it.
The question is, I think what you're asking is, do we see keeping it all on this on the lower level, or do we need to push up on the first floor perhaps to get space there? And that has, again, there are a lot of possibilities. The loading docks currently are, as shown, are near Rickleton. They might move down. It's possible that there'll be some storage on the first floor. We're just not sure, but everything's in play with Kings because until we know what we're doing with Kings, we really can't finish the rest of the first floor.
It's unfortunate to take first floor space.
We have some other creative ideas to avoid that, but again, until we I don't want to put the cart before the horse with Kings. Okay. Thank you.
We're going to go first question, everyone, and then we'll have some repeat questions. Yes, ma'am. And Rich, if you could repeat the question.
Sure. And please introduce yourself. No, what you would like us to do is take a look at the basic context of the village itself. I think its architecture, its materials, right? Especially look at the theater across the street, which has a very special material, terracotta, right? And see what we can sort of weave into our building that very much responds to buildings that are in the village itself. I think that was the question. The answer is that's a great observation. It's something that's extremely important to us, that we weave this building back into the fabric of the village, right? That we look at the scale of the buildings on Maplewood Avenue. We look at storefronts, windows, doors, signage, lighting, awnings. We look at color of bricks, tonality of buildings. We look at its details. We look at the scale of windows. We look at how windows are broken down, 1/1s, 2/2s. We look at all those sort of things, and I think what's terrific about the village itself is that it has a variety of different building types, which have very different character to it. And so there's lots of elements which could be weaved into our building so that it celebrates, I think, the character and a sense of place of Maplewood Avenue. So yes, the theater is very special architecturally, right? But you can also look at a lot of other buildings that are 1-story, 2-story, 3-story buildings. They each have their own separate character. Some of it's vernacular, and some of it is very beautifully detailed. So I think as we get into the project and move forward, right, I think a lot of that sort of secondary level of detail and refinement to our building, you'll start to see in some of the work that we'll show you in the future.
Make sure people know who you are.
I'm Richard Metzke. I'm a partner at Beyer Blinder Bell. Thanks.
The other thing
one of the other things I was just going to say quickly is that Rich is also a resident of Millburn and is desperately trying to prevent this site from making Maplewood anything like Millburn.
Peter, I'll be with you in 1 minute. We have a couple of questions from the phone, but I did want to just add to that. There is a design review committee that's set up by the Village Alliance, and it has more architects on than I've ever seen before, and designers. And they are meeting with the team here to go over those very questions. And it's pretty explicit in the plan, and then there's design standards of the Alliance. So they have to work with the Alliance in making that going forward. We have a couple of questions. I'm going to do one question, then we'll come to Peter, and then we'll do the next question. What is the name of the project going to be called? And this kills me. Could it be named after, say, Mayor Grasmere? We've had a bunch of mayors after him. But, and could citizens be involved in naming the project? Well, let me just say, take that. Yeah. No, and no. This is a sale of property to the developer, so they will be responsible for naming the project. And we will not have. We'll certainly accept recommendations, and we have the first one, Mayor Grasmere, but. This will be their decision. They will make some marketing. They do have some ideas already, and they'll be making, I think the name will work with the marketing. I do know that you said at some of the previous meetings that you don't want King's to overtake the building. So the signage for King's will be subtle and strategically located so that it doesn't appear that it's a King's building, and that'll have other identities with it.
That's absolutely true. One of the things that we've been obsessing a lot about at the Haynes development, for example, is how to include appropriate signage on a national landmark. These guys, Rich and Frank, have done a lot of signage, review signage guidelines. They do it at the Empire State Building, and I think you've also done it at Grand Central as well. So we have every expectation of imposing a signage guideline that keeps signage consistent with what is here and does not usurp the aesthetic that we have and we like about Maplewood. We do have an intent to do a naming of the building, and we do. I'm surprised you didn't actually. It's your building. Oh, all right. Well, so we've been. One of the theories is that we've banded about is actually orienting the residential entry towards Rick Hilton Square, and in so doing, better engaging the building with the square. That turning of the lobby entrance and turning the residential entrance actually then begs the question whether we should name the building in deference to Rick Hilton Square, and so we've been tinkering with One Rick Hilton Square as the name of the building. I generally am not a name of building guy. I've worked on buildings and almost uniformly named them after their street addresses, but One Rick Hilton Square, I think, has a polish that might fit well.
Okay, Peter, I said we'd go to you, and then we have two more questions for the phone. I'm sorry, 762-8120, extension 2110. It's not going to go all that way. Go ahead, Peter, and we'll repeat it.
Yell at the microphone. We are very intent to see that elevation. We think that elevation is particularly important as we engage with King's in how their space engages with the streetscape. So we will be back with that elevation. Know this, that as we produced this iteration of the plans, we were operating with survey data that needs to be expanded, and so we are rushing to try and get very much more detailed information on the topography and its variations. That will obviously enhance the presentation we make when we try and address the pertinent point you just made. We think that the site has afforded us an opportunity because of that topography, but we understand that that opportunity comes with the challenge of making sure it remains appropriate for this town.
The next set of drawings that will be public, which is, let's say, in about a month, I envision that because it's a four-sided building, we'll have perspectives probably from at least three or four standpoints. So it'll be a lot clearer what it looks like from every angle. And that will be on the evolved plan, not on a plan that is no longer current.
The other thing I want to tell you is that the plan says that the frontage on Maplewood Avenue can only be 30 feet, and then anything above that has to be pushed back. And the Village Coffee side can only be 40 feet, and then everything there has to be pushed back 2 feet for every foot above 40 feet. So those top floors will be pushed back from the frontage of the building. Okay, we have another question from the phone. What impact do you foresee on the school system with the additional 25 apartments?
Very, very little impact on, we envision very little impact on the school district. Approximately half of the units will be, rental apartments will be 1 bedroom, and the other half will be 2 bedroom. Nothing will be greater than 2 bedrooms. 2 bedroom apartments, while they may have a child or two, well, it may have a child, they generally don't have 2 school-age children. I think my guess, and I haven't studied it on this particular site, but we're probably expecting 5 or less children in this development.
5 school age or 5 below school?
So I think we're expecting probably 5 kids in this development, probably, if I were guessing, maybe 2 school-age children in the whole development. That would be the norm. If you look at kind of the standard counts, it's approximately I think it's 0.15 kids in a 2-bedroom that are school-age children.
Sir, you had a question.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to probably rope you guys into helping me answer some of this. So the first question I believe you asked related to the relative location of the property line to the building. I've added back the existing Alex's site plan with the existing post office building on it. In that he depicts the street wall of the existing post office removed step back from the red line, the property line. We are indeed building to the property line, so our footprint extends to that property line, and therefore it has the potential of reducing the current setback, but not the sidewalk, because as you may recall in your mind's eye, there is a bench and a tree and a grass niche in front of the post office. So that space is going to be claimed for building. The sidewalk remains effectively intact. Is that basically the right story, guys? Okay. Setback, you mean so that the street wall, I don't know whether I can answer that. I think the street wall on Village Coffee actually is far forward, and actually because the sidewalk width there is more narrow than what we may end up with in front of the post office. Alex may be looking for something, but so it's Tim, right? Okay, don't go anywhere. We'll try to look that up too. So, second question was something about the grade and the retail. Okay, so you asked one part of your question related to can we lower the grade of the first floor retail to thereby bury further the King's space. And the concern we're running into, obviously, is we don't want to spend an inordinate amount of time and effort excavating the center of town. Instead, I think what we're dealing with is the lowest slab will be approximately at the existing level of the slab, and that King's is going to be asked to live with a particular ceiling height. And in so doing, I think King's is going to have to potentially accept less than their ideal. So if we were to push that ceiling or that floor of the first floor retail down, we would be encroaching upon their usable and viable height. Obviously, our ideal is to expand the number of retail storefronts that are appropriate and contextual and therefore have stores of that size. However, we may simply have to live with retail spaces that align themselves easily with the topography of the street. So we may end up, this depiction theoretically only has 3 retail spaces. To be clear, well, the 7,000 one depicted here, and your question was, is it really 7,000? Well, as Bill glibly put, this is an evolving species, and so it will end up being what it will be, and we'll give you updates, but that's how Rich and Frank and Jack have laid it out in the current iteration we're showing. This assumes that we could enter this way and that way and split the space. And then the third space would be a discrete space that a couple of my neighbors favored having cafe-style seating, so that's why Rich's design gracefully included that setback, that chamfered frontage, so that we could sort of step away from the street and therefore have more pedestrian access here. We're gaining sidewalk pedestrian access here. So you asked a lot of questions and I've talked a lot. Does that mean I've answered your questions?
Yeah. One other thing I want to say is that the plan requires an 11-foot minimum width of sidewalks on Maplewood Avenue. So that's a little wider than it is right now. So these guys have to go back to the drawing board. Rickleton Square and Maplewood Avenue require 11 feet minimum, 15 feet maximum, and all the other sidewalks around the building have to be 6 feet width. We have a question from the phone, and I'll answer this. Are there any plans for the building that King's is in now if King's was to move across the street? The building that King's is in now is leased by King's, and it has probably at the end of the day when this all occurs, it will have about a 15-year lease still in effect. And King's has told us in our conversations with them that they will seek to sublease that property out, and it's conceivable that they would divide it up into smaller shops. It's also possible that they would use some of the space for themselves. So that still is something that we will be discussing with King's. That building does fall under the normal zoning of the village. So if there's any change there, they'd have to come in to do a site plan, and we'd be able to work with them on accommodating what they want to do there. Does anyone here have a question? Because I got another one, Tim. Yeah, that would be good. This way it's easier. Thank you.
Timothy Gill, Hickory Drive. I've lived in Maplewood 28 years, 2 different houses, and I have 2 main questions, but the background, in a sense, is one of the reasons I love Maplewood is I lived in Europe for 6 years in some of the older parts of Geneva, Switzerland, and a lot of the neighborhoods were built in the 20s, four-story apartment buildings. And so some of these New Jersey towns like Maplewood, Madison, have always appealed to me because of the 1920s era, and I think it's particularly special. So my main concerns in this development, and I've always been delighted to think that we're going to do this because I thought the post office was a blight on the downtown, and the downtown is a very special place. So, which you know, John, is a resident, which I'm very happy to see that you're a resident of the town. My main concern is the harmony of the building with the town and what people think of the town and how they experience it. And part of that is visual, obviously. Part of it is functional, how people flow in the town and such. And though Maplewood doesn't have a coherent style from the 20s or the 30s or whatever, I believe that some of the architecture in the town, from the high school to the municipal building to the middle school to Jefferson School, which dates from the 20s, is pretty characteristic that people identify with Maplewood. And so I would love that the design consideration consider that aspect. And so for the picture that you can't see now of the one elevation, the brick on the first floor, second floor looks reasonable. Frankly, the third floor to me looks like 1960s Drek, which we have on Columbia High School. I mean, you can go to the Wikipedia page on Columbia High School, 1926 building, what do they call it, academic Gothic or something? And then in the 60s, they built this Wing D, and it's very ugly, frankly. And I find that third floor like that. And so I'd love to know what involvement the public can have in the design process so that we can give you feedback as you refine the design so that we can come up with something that really is more suitable to the town given the history. My second question is, also having lived in Europe, personally, I am frustrated by all the concern about parking because I think people should walk more, but apart from that, in Switzerland and France, there were a lot of developments I saw where they would put 2- and 3-story underground parking facilities so that there would not be any surface parking because of the visual effect. And I wondered, what are the issues other than we don't do that in the US except in big cities? Can we make a 2-story underground parking here to add more parking?
Jack, I'm going to invite you to join us if you have particular thoughts on answering question number 2. And I'll start, and you can maybe throw in some other data. But yeah, that's fine. Well, do you want to come up here and do? Let me start with number 1. So number 1, we anticipate being present and responsive to the public here. I think I've alluded to the fact that my neighbors have already impacted the site plan, and so I anticipate that there will remain a process that will be something of a evolution with public input. But I know that the township has designated a design review committee with a surplus of architects, and we anticipate that their input hasn't actually been that dissimilar from what you just said. Their input will help drive the changing elevation for the building. So the public, as represented by that group, will have a regular forum for input. The second question related to subsurface parking. And you know, it's interesting, as a resident, I was terribly concerned about digging a big hole in the middle of town. First and foremost, because I thought the pain and suffering of construction should be kept to a minimum, not by creating a big hole in the ground. But additionally, I don't know whether parking in a cellar space is what we would expect from the context of Maplewood. Maplewood doesn't have a lot of subsurface parking, so I'm thinking that our introduction of that would actually have been the kind of thing you would have hated us for, because you would have said, well, there's no context for it, why are you putting it here? Well, maybe I'm wrong, and but my guess was that the community would have thought this to be well in excess of what was reasonable for this site. But from an engineering perspective, there probably are some other components of this that might be problematic.
Yeah, a couple.
Who are you?
Hi, my name's Jack Inglaze. I'm Jack Inglaze. I'm part of the design team as a civil engineer. Just in response to the question about subsurface parking, we're talking about subsurface parking lower than the lower section of this site, which is already a story below Maplewood Avenue. So you're talking about a two-story excavation adjacent to Maplewood Avenue. That has its own issues that you just discussed, but primarily, I think the issues are digging a hole that deep in such proximity to the train is going to be an issue for New Jersey Transit. And in addition, it's actually a relatively small site. So by the time you got down to this level and then went down to another level, you would use as much space with a ramp as you had developed as parking in the back, and unless you use the lowest level here as parking and push Kings to the first floor, which I don't think anybody really wants to do, getting 2 levels of parking here is not going to be very efficient. Very expensive and not very efficient.
I mean, there are cities in Europe where I've seen it as well. There's places, frankly, in this country where it's done. It's generally done when things are redone, and it's done as a piece of a much bigger development. This is just, if one was going to do that, you would say, we're going to take the whole downtown and we're going to make all the parking underneath it. I mean, that's essentially what you see. In Rome, they have parking in areas, but the areas are huge areas. And it's really more of a master plan kind of thing. It's not an individual site kind of thing.
Okay, I have another phone question. And this is, you're going to have 25 residents, and you're going to have the King Supermarket, and will backup truck alarms be addressed for deliveries?
There will be backup truck alarms because there have to be on the trucks. I don't think that's avoidable. I think what is avoidable that we're working with Kings on already is to have the hours of delivery limited to a finite period of time, so it's not happening 24/7.
The other question from the phone. The other question is, will you eliminate all visible and above ground wires to the building, and will you have a power generator?
We'll certainly not have, we'll have all underground utilities to the building. We haven't really gotten into whether we'll have backup generation. I don't know. I'm thinking, does Kings have it now? I don't think Kings
They do have a backup generator up on the roof, I believe.
Yeah, then if they do, they'll probably have it. I don't know if we'd have it for our building. We might have it for the elevator. I'm not sure.
Any other questions? Yes, David. Yeah, let me. So the question is, how do we know that? Well, it's just going to be a burden for renters to have to move their car. Anyone living there is going to have to move their car during the day. We now have renters in Maplewood Village that purchase permits from us, and they're allowed to park overnight. We also have people who, throughout town, we have about 5 public parking lots in which we allow overnight parking by permit. All those parkers must move their car during the day. Some leave to go to work, some have other places to put their cars. Some, I'm sure, maybe jockey, go every 2 hours from one spot to another. That's just the fact of life. These spots that get created, number one, they will not be dedicated to any store, nor will they be dedicated to this building during the day. And number two, that if we do a permit system, then these folks, as part of their knowledge of renting there, will know that they have to move it. The other thing that we're looking at is that, as as the owners of the former Women's Club, there is some possibility of expanding some parking there. And in a longer term idea, we are looking at the possibility of maybe putting a deck on one of the existing parking lots in town. The one that may work, the Baker Street lot, although it's narrow and it's owned by transit, we'd have to do some encroachment on Maplewood Avenue in order to get the turning lanes in there. The other possibility, which would be a smaller deck, would be the Highland lot, the way that slopes down, and might even, and with the Women's Club having access there, that might be a possibility. That's something we're going to continue to look at after this starts. You know, as Bill said, we got a 15 to 18 month period between now and when somebody's going to be moving in there. And some of these are going to be discussed now. We're going to be making some plans and looking at these possibilities going forward. But we do think, just on the Women's Club, that we can add about 30 spots there, which could be an overflow for some of these folks that have the permits. They could purchase a day permit from us, say, and park there. So they'd purchase a night permit to park by their house and a day permit to park somewhere else. Any other questions here? And then we'll go to you, Julie. So the question is that the opinion is that the building is too high and out of scale with the rest of the village, and the village coffee shop building, which is adjacent to this site, is it the profit motive that's requiring you to do 25 units of housing?
As the mayor said earlier when he kind of introduced this, we were responsive to the studies that the township had done, which resulted in the RFP requirements. The step backs that are required are such that the way this building is experienced, for the most part, is really not as a 5-story building. Obviously, if you're looking at it from down the road from Village Coffee and you look up, you'll see a 5-story building. But with the way the mass is broken up and step back, we think it actually works. We'll be demonstrating that with the next series of drawings and perspectives. We'll really see what it looks like coming from that angle. As far as your question about it being profit motivated, yeah, that the economics have to work for us to do the development, and economics of what we pay the town has to work for the town. The RFP is precedent on these guidelines, and essentially we're going to be negotiating a price with the town, and I assume that if we were to, I assume that the economics really do matter to the town because they're in fact selling the site to us.
Right.
John.
Okay, and I know you came in late, but what I said is one question, and we can come back to you, so you've made your question and your comment. Thank you. All right, Julie? Give her the mic so she can's right there. Just try to be crisp, because we're getting close to the...
Sure. Your section AA isn't indicated in your drawing where it's taken from? Section AA, but from where above is it taken from? When you have a cut through that's a portion of another drawing, you usually indicate on the other drawing where it's exactly from there. Okay. All right. Where's... It's the other way. Okay. All right. That's what I thought. Thanks. Where is the entrance to King's? That's one of my questions.
Julie,
what happens when...
Mike, closer, thank you.
Where's the entrance to King's? What happens when King's doesn't want to move? Do you have a contingency plan? And do you have to comply with the state's mandates for affordable housing?
Okay. All right. The easiest one was the last one. Okay. The expectation is that the affordable housing would be a component of this transaction, not because the state's COA program is intact, but because the township has asked us to comply with the threshold guidelines of that program. To be clear, their 10% of the units would be set aside as affordable. And we anticipate that means 10% of each unit type. So if there's a 10% of ones, 10% of twos. Okay, that was the easy question. The second question, I think, was King's. King's entries, entries, are anticipated to be, they very much would like to provide for an entry on or around the corner of Maplewood Avenue in this depiction. In that depiction, their entry would be added at the sidewalk elevation, and that there would be a stair down. As a supplement to that, they would have a series of double doors or double doors on this facade, because we anticipate that this is where you would experience King's most regularly, that your utilization of that space would be on this plane. Sorry, yeah. So to be clear again, the way we've presented it to them so far is that their principal frontage is here. Am I in the way over there now? Yeah, that's what the pointer's for. Oh. So right, this line represents the front door facade, if you will, of Maplewood, of King's. This elevation, that point would be the primary entrance that they want on Maplewood Avenue. If they choose not to move, our contingency plans may be to identify another appropriate user for the town that would be an addition, but not be a source of cannibalization, that would be a complement to existing retailers, something that would serve our community's needs, maybe save you a couple trips to 10 and 22, maybe actually give you something that would be helpful to have in town. Duly noted.
Let's move on.
The first question.
What happens if King's doesn't go there?
Oh, then we have the contingency plan of looking for other one. Okay, good.
Okay. David?
Right.
Question is, what would be the appraisal of this build-out site?
I don't know that I know the answer to that as yet. I think the problem may end up being the lack of easy comparability, that there may not be a site of this particular ilk with this many limitations and opportunities. I think when you all started this process, the town may not have anticipated that they would keep the drive aisle, for example, and I'm not sure that that any of us really have thought through how to measure what the price of this land might be. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I jumped to that. That was a inference.
That's correct. It'll be a sales revenue, sales appraisal.
Okay. That's true. I mean, a birdie over here has given me the idea that maybe we could approach this from like a cost approach and then try to do something off that. And I think the expected budget may end up being something around, what is it, $8 to $10 million? So I don't know exactly how then to utilize that information to give you clear data, but as we take on this project, obviously we want to assure that there is enough to cover that cost in the deal.
Appraisers today give us that answer.
I suspect that's something we should be doing now as we start to approach financing sources, and it'll, you know, it's not so far away that we'll have an answer for you. Oh, you're right. You're right. I'm convinced that we could charge somebody to do that, and the town may have already done that at some juncture. But we, at this point, probably have not spent enough time thinking about that point. And listen, part of the challenge I'm dealing with is, as a taxpayer in this town, obviously I have motives. I'd like to see my taxes positively affected, but on the other hand, I don't think the project can happen without being kind of realistic about what this project can bear. And yeah, if any, all right. I mean, it may end up being a de minimis impact because you spread it around all of our tax bills. It's probably less than $1.
Yeah, I don't think, you know, John is just waxing poetically here. I think you probably don't know exactly what we're going to be doing because we don't know yet. So I understand as a resident, but we don't know what the impact's going to be or what it's going to mean. You know, there's growth in taxes every year, and there may be the ability not to have a growth in taxes because the revenue from this would offset that. So we don't know until that happens. Anyone else want to, let's move on to.
All right. Bill may talk to you afterwards.
The question is, can you please re-explain the affordable housing components of this plan? Can you explain the 10% you mentioned earlier in greater detail?
Our expectation is that if we end up at 24 units, we'll have 2 affordable units, one bedroom and one 2-bedroom, and if we end up at 25 units, we'll have 3 affordable units because it'll round up to 3.
And the units are under the regulation of the state. There's an income guideline that gets established every year by the state. The town has a contract with an organization called Community Grants and Planning and Housing, and they administer our affordable housing program. We have a 2-part. One is that we find residents for these homes. We have, I think there's 4 at the station house, and there's 17 that are going to be going into the Maplewood Crossing. And the other thing they do, Community Grants and Planning, is we have a rehab program for eligible households that we provide up to $20,000 to rehab your house so that you could stay in it and keep it affordable. So that's the total of the affordable housing program, and they will work with us to implement that. Inda, you have another comment? Just on that, the redevelopment plan doesn't say it has to be in the building. It says, it does not. It says required residential parking spaces shall be provided within the rehabilitation area. Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to have a question? Yes, Kurt.
If you describe how the shopping experience on Maple Avenue is going to be.
Again, whatever John mentioned about the tax impact was his own comment. Okay, his own opinion, and we haven't run any numbers or had any conversation with them yet about the tax impact.
Is it appropriate to retract my comment?
Okay. The question you asked is about the Maplewood Avenue shopping. What is it going to be like? What are you anticipating? How is it going to enhance the downtown experience? And I think we have one more question from the phone, and then we're going to wrap it up.
All right, I'm really sorry that I did some tax
That's forecasting. Right. Let's just go on to the answer. You'll do it again.
The intent here is to connect this site into the fabric of the retail experience already there. Currently, as you experience Maplewood Avenue, the post office does not connect with the other shopping opportunities, both across the street and down the street by Village Coffee. Extend that retail further along Maplewood Avenue, make it support and extend the other retailers, and I suspect it will make for a more complete shopping experience in our town. I suspect the size and shapes of our spaces, again, will not create likely redundancies in our shopping. I suspect that there may be additions made by the new retail that we offer in our spaces. These are these are deep spaces, big spaces. Tim earlier made the point that they seemed like they were large areas, and they're not like the spaces that are already in the town, but we would like to be able to have retail that extends the character of the town. It's sort of early yet for us to start anticipating who's going to be enticed to our retail. I have some very, again, as a Maplewood guy, I have some very, very strong preferences for particular retail that would be the kinds of things that I hope for and maybe that my neighbors hope for. But yes, so I'm hearing hardware and pharmacy as some preferences. I think on some level, I really want to get to that place where we can talk about who is the interested parties, because I think that will be a good part of this story. Oh, I think I said earlier probably I estimated 3. and I didn't anticipate that they would be, they would, you know, I joked that they would save you a trip to 22 and 10. They're not likely to be a national, they are more likely to be homegrown folks who are already in our space somewhere, whether it's in towns like Maplewood, who want to expand their footprints, who do well in Montclair, Ridgewood, or Westfield, but not the Nationals in Westfield. Let's take Westfield out of the mix for a minute there. So let's say Montclair and Ridgewood, and see if those are towns that might support additional good add-ons to what we've got. I mean, we do a lot of retail in our portfolio. We spend a lot of time trying to think ahead about community building, not without an eye for enhancing what's already there, because ours is a building we intend to own, and we want to make sure that our building gains from the continued success of its neighbors.
Okay, we have one last question. This will be number 9 from the phone. I know you have been in the building, and if you could talk about the answer to this and also how you'll deal with it in the demolition. Do you know if there is asbestos in the existing post office building? Or any other hazardous materials?
We are in the process of doing an investigation for other hazardous materials. We just concluded the investigation on asbestos. The post office did an asbestos abatement program probably 20 years ago, where they identified a lot of asbestos that was in decent condition, and they left it and labeled it, and they removed other asbestos. The asbestos that remains is really quite minimal. It's probably it's a very innocuous amount of asbestos, very easy to remove. Nothing, however, will be done until the post office is vacant. But right before we demolish the post office, we'll do asbestos abatement, and frankly, it would probably take a day.
Okay, do you guys have anything, last things you want to say?
I wanted to thank all of you for coming out, and for the public for listening and calling in. It's definitely the beginning of a process, and we look forward to moving through it.
And I want to thank everybody.
Ditto.
This has been, oh, you want to say something, John? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say ditto.
Okay, that was good. I want to thank everybody for coming out in the cold and for calling in. Getting 9 calls was good. We are probably going to take a break now and meeting with various stakeholders, because we've had really in the last week or so, week and a half, have met with a lot of groups, got a lot of input. We need a little time to digest everything, work on some of these changes, and then we'll be back. Everything we find from this point forward, we'll be putting on the website and moving forward in that degree. And then, you know, for our need to have more meetings like this, certainly the planning board is going to get involved. We'll keep everyone informed and part of the process. Okay, thank you very much.